Welcome to the Safety Brief, your go-to source for the latest trends and insights in cybersecurity. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and today we'll be exploring the vast growth of AI in the cyber world and how to protect your privacy. Joining me today is Mike. Thank you, as always, for being here. Just to kind of
Absolutely.
set the tone for this episode, we are going to jump right into a short clip demonstrating the dangers of oversharing online. If you are an audio only listener, you may want to skip this section of the discussion or catch it on our live platforms such as Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter.
Absolutely. And specific to this video, the topic that we're unpacking is specifically digital privacy. I'm a parent. I have young kids, and I think this week's safety brief topic is for everybody. So if you're a CISO looking for some maybe groundbreaking competitive strategies for implementing cybersecurity, this week is really specific to anyone that has children, nieces and nephews, in-laws with kids, anybody today that interfaces or has compassion towards children is going to want to stick around for the entirety of this episode because the topics we're going to be unpacking are relevant. They are heavy, but they are things we can't be silent about. So for the next 30 to 45 minutes, we appreciate you journeying with us. This is an important topic. It's something near and dear to my heart, near and dear to Elizabeth's heart, and we're going to intentionally tackle it this week. But obviously, for those with sensitivities, the video is specifically around the privacy of children as it pertains to social media content and what content is just openly being published that can be maliciously used by threat actors, right? So there's nothing explicit about the content. There is one expletive as far as language is concerned, but we do want to just give that forewarning and appreciate you continuing on with us for the rest of this episode.
Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad. It's me, Ella. Well, a digital version of me. Just a bit older. Amazing what technology can do these days, isn't it? All you need are a couple of pictures, like the ones you share on social media, where they can be taken and used by everybody. I know, for you, these pictures are just memories. But for others, they are data. And for me, maybe the beginning of a horrible future. A future where my identity can be stolen just like that. Where I can go to prison for things that I would never do. Imagine my credit score being destroyed, Dad. Or my voice copied to scam you, Mom. Mom, I'm in trouble. I need you to send me money, please. I don't want to become a meme, humiliated by everyone at school.
Kill yourself, you fucking loser.
And I certainly don't want this. What you share online is like a digital footprint that will follow me around for the rest of my life. I'm telling you this because I know you love me and would never do anything to harm me. So please, Mom, please, Dad, protect my virtual privacy.
Like we said, it's heavy, right? It's
Yeah.
heavy. But as a girl dad, something that I never maybe thought of 10, 20 years ago in my life. This is something near and dear to my heart because I think there's a lot of well-intended people out there, uh, parents, uncles, aunts, babysitters, grandparents, whoever they are, that just willingly and unknowingly share photos online of children that again, there's data privacy concerns for their future that have to be considered, right, about consent, and are those photos going online without those individuals consent, but as well as what can threat actors do with it. So specifics within the scope of today, we're going to be unpacking AI and deep fakes. We're going to be introducing that topic and talking a little bit about what is a deep fake, how is it relevant, and the specific case studies we're going to look at. There's an article that's been published by the Department of Homeland Security that has very specific applications to corporate, commerce, societal, right? Like, so again, if you're a parent, if you're a professional, if you're both, if you're only one or the other, there are absolutely practical applications here within the scope of today's study.
Yeah, you're definitely right. It is a very heavy clip, but it is very important. So let's just dive right in with deepfakes. These are hyper realistic digital forgeries created using artificial intelligence, capable of swapping faces and videos, as we just kind of demonstrated there, mimicking voices and generated deceptive media content. So, Mike, could you go ahead and explain how deepfakes pose a threat to individual privacy on social media? I know we do have a article to share on.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I was just doing some research, and this was published by a company called Canopy. They provide services to families specific around content filtering for children and families within the home. So huge shout out for them for drafting this article. It's incredibly recent too. I mean, this is April of this year, but we're going to unpack specifically for those that are not familiar with the term. What is a deep fake? So a deep fake is simply a digital manipulation of images, video, audio, some individually only, or some of them all together, right? So this can be just an audio clip, this can be just a video clip, this can be just an image, but it's using AI and machine learning technology, sometimes deep learning, creates a very realistic and almost impossible to discern to the human eye replication of something that is not real. And so this is relevant to audio deep fakes that we've seen even with political entities as of late. This is specific to law enforcement and evidence in a case of being able to potentially manipulate or frame or deceive, whether it's video surveillance, whether it's just photograph evidence, things of that nature. But this was a novel technology. I think a lot of enthusiasts got after this and said, this is awesome. This is neat. Like, I didn't go to Paris, but here's me in Paris. I didn't go to France, or Italy or Rome or wherever it is, but here's me, right? And so there was an initial novelty, really driven by creativity here, that was like, oh, this is incredible. We can do this. But in anything humanity gets their hands on, we're undoubtedly going to abuse it in some form. And so specifically, the uprise of this that we've seen is really an amalgamation of how much easier AI is to access, how much easier it is to use, and obviously the awareness piece of the capability being much more common today than it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And so that's specifically what a deep fake is. We're not going to unpack how to create one today, but that is, if you haven't heard the term before, for the sake of glossary, that's what that is.
And it is crazy on how popular deepfakes really are becoming. My husband and actually just watched a movie recently, I think called The Fall Guy. And in this movie, one of the actors had a like a fall guy that he's using. It's his stunt double, so he kind of looks like him, same build. You know how they do that for movies. And he actually committed a crime, and it was on video, and they scanned his stunt double using deep learning. That way, when they do the stunts on the movies and stuff, they can move the face that's needed on
Exactly.
there, and so on and so forth. So even though that this was, set up to be non-harmful, just used into movies, in the movie it actually showed that he was trying to frame his stunt double, and they actually used a deep fake and recreated the video that would have incriminated the actor and instead pointed the finger at his stunt double. So it is crazy to think that even movies now are kind of putting in innuendos there with the
Oh
deep
yeah.
fakes.
Oh yeah.
So
It's almost breaking the fourth wall of the
yeah,
movie, of the cinema in a way, right? Because again, all good art reflects life in its truest form, but specifically being able to break the fourth wall and kind of talk about inter cinematic dynamics, like a stunt double, like a double or a third or whatever it is, a lookalike. But it's interesting because just 2 years ago it was like, uh, find your doppelganger and let's post it
yeah,
online. That was the social media trend. It was like, what's the celebrity I look most like? And now it's how far it's come in just 18 to 24 months. That's not a long time. And so unpacking this, we talked about it initially. Where did this come from at its onset was really a creative element, so um, movie, cinematic, whatever form of creative visual arts, but the implications of the technology as the awareness rose, as the accessibility rose, meaning you didn't need thousands of dollars of a budget and crazy technology to do some of these things. Now
yeah,
that it's more accessible and there's a higher awareness, this is where threat actors take this kind of technology and run it down the field. So we talked a little bit about an audio deepfake, and this is replicated in the form of any social engineering attack that we've seen within cybersecurity. So this could be obviously a phishing email, which is text only, or an audio clip attached saying, you have a new voicemail. Well, guess what? That audio clip's going to sound awfully real if I have just snippets of your voice from an Instagram reel, from whatever has been published online. Again, these things are not as protected than maybe as these platforms tout they are. And so all of these open source mediums that we can reach out and grab these data streams from, compile it into software and say, hey, okay, I want a voice that's pretty close to Mike's. I want a voice that's pretty close to Elizabeth's. And us being here in audio and visual form is a part of that data set. So we're obviously consenting to that. But the
yeah.
point is, when minors are involved, when there's certain elements of this that get really, really sensitive around children and family, there's definitely a reason to have pause and think twice. And so we're not trying to dismantle the value of being able to share photos with grandma and granddad, or make some iMovie creation and share it at your local family reunion. Those are good, wholesome things, right? Family videos are good. We should keep them around.
Oh
But I
yeah,
think where we share them and how we share them and with whom they can be, or by whom they can be accessed by, are questions that I hope all of these listeners are going to take very seriously, if not already, but going forward, because it's data security is always, number one, confidentiality, who is able to access that data, the integrity of that data, meaning who can manipulate it. Is it view only or can I download it? So
hmm
specifically, if it's on Instagram, there are certain social media apps that you can screenshot. There are some on Facebook you can just right click and save the image. Right. And so thinking about these mediums, and then obviously availability of, are these private protected social media posts, or are these public, anybody can access them that has access to my first name, last name. Right.
yeah. And I do get it, it is hard to have that conversation with family. I just had my firstborn and I had to really describe and break down why I don't want my child to be all over social media. Because, I've got other family members who share that, and that's totally okay. That's their decision. And I did, kind of break down my reason to them. And I think they kind of changed on the amount of sharing that they're doing. Um, but it is a hard conversation to tell, grandma and grandpa, please don't post, your grandchild. But there are platforms that you can, safely and securely share photos. For me, instantly, um, I use a family album app to where you can invite family members, and they can actually see and get notifications when you upload photos. So I am uploading photos to a platform, but it's private. You have to be invited, and you can't do anything with those photos. There's no, downloading or anything of that nature. As Mike said, though, there is screenshotting, and that's something that is really hard to get around. And that's why we were very careful on who we invited to that app and let them know the rules and why we were doing that for our child. So, And there are platforms like Facebook and Twitter, and they have introduced policies to label or remove deepfakes or misinformation to protect users. However, they don't have protection in place to keep those deepfakes from being proposed or made.
Exactly.
So they may take those down or flag them, but they're not preventing it from happening in the first place. And BLOKWORX and the safety brief are all about prevention, what you
That's
can
right.
do to stop it from happening, not what to do afterwards.
That's right.
Because whether it's up there for a minute, a year, a day, damages can be done.
That's
So,
right.
what measures can we personally take on social media to prevent the spread of deepfakes?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I have a but I have a practical example here of at least a post that I did following Mother's Day. So let me find this here. So here's an example, right? And if you've ever come across a social media post where there are emojis or something over children's faces, welcome to the reality of why that may be, right? And so this is just a shout out to my wife. Happy Mother's Day post, simple as that. But you'll notice our children's faces are not included in this photo, and specifically within the scope of Twitter and X. Most of my tweets or most of my posts are private. I don't require a follower only view stream. On Facebook, you can manipulate that. On Instagram, you can manipulate that, right? But again, it's just a thought conscience of, hey, who can access this? Where am I posting this? How can it be accessible? But this is just one example of, hey, just a quick doctoring of the photo. You still want to share the memory. You still want to brag about, hey, this is how great my spouse is. I love my kids, right? There is a way to still do that, but there's also a way to do it with some protections in place that, hey, that video can't be potentially used or exploited for those under 18. And again, right, how do you get away from it? You could take the approach to extinguish all online presence. And for some people, that's the right call. And I think, just giving everyone a really far left and right lateral limit here, everybody listening to this is going to have a different comfortability level. There are going to be some that say, oh, well, all my data is out there. What can I do? It's a complete defeatist approach to it. They don't care. Then the other side is, no, every post, every piece of data I send out there will absolutely be mined, utilized, sold, resold, reused in some form or fashion, right? So again, wherever your comfortability level is, we can't drive your personal conviction. All we can do is raise awareness and educate on it, which is why we're here today. But specifically, please have pause. Please take pause and caution with posting media online of adolescents, of those under the age of 18, even those over the age of 18, right? Like, there are certain laws in place. Like, I think there was one in maybe it was Illinois. Correct me if I'm wrong, whoever's watching this, and will fact check me later, but there is implications around even like there was a red light ticket case of where like photos were being taken of drivers that maybe didn't have the explicit consent to give. There were also implications of if you're at work and work is taking media promotional images. I used to work at the Apple Store in Chicago, and so there were instances where they wanted to do media events and things like that. But in Illinois, there's certain very specific controls around imagery in the form of static image and video, that there is a consent heavy culture. And I can't be more of a fan of that, right? And so, but again, specific to personal conviction, it will vary greatly. All we can do is encourage you to take pause when it applies to specifically children. How you treat your data is, of course, up to you. The second component is there is large left and right lateral limit difference in state legislature on this topic right now. And I know Elizabeth's doing some research earlier leading up to this episode to make sure we came to this fully educated, but there are certain laws in certain states around specifically addressing deep fakes, specifically addressing how they can be created if or without the individual's consent that they are replicating. And obviously threat actors don't care about any of these sanctions or laws, right? But specifically there are, right, but there will be a well-intended people that try to make a marketing video or some form of advertisement or something in another. Maybe they could just they could be an organizer for kids' birthday parties, and they'll have some promotional graphics of here's a bounce house, here's this, but they need to be very careful about whose images they put in those, right? And so again, consent culture is always going to be erring on the side of caution on this matter, but we encourage anybody listening specific to the United States or abroad. I know we do have some international listeners, which we're super grateful for, but specific to the case of deep fakes and image and video media that is manipulated, check with your local state legislation on what you can do, what you can't do as it pertains to AI manipulating data, and also obviously the consent component as well.
Yeah, I can confirm we did search a little bit earlier today just to see if there were any federal laws, and there are not. So it is important to go ahead and look and see what kind of protection you have in your state or what kind of laws you need to be staying within the lines of. So can you dive a little bit deeper into current legal landscape for deepfakes and AI? I know you had an article prepared to kind of walk through some scenarios and things of that nature.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, for those that have been watching the safety brief for a while, you're like, there's a lot of articles. And this was something we couldn't approach this topic without
Yeah.
a exhaustive amount of research. We really needed to measure our steps here. Not that we just go into topics willy-nilly, but this is one that we just wanted to make sure we honored really well. So specific to this article, this is a 40, I think it's a 41 page or 43 page report put out by the Department of Homeland Security. And this is page 18. So this is a very long article. We'll make sure to link this for the readers in our audience that want to catch up and read this whole thing. But what I appreciate about this piece is the scenarios. And for those that are kind of, we're 20 minutes into this discussion and saying, okay, hey, this might be hypervigilant. This might be a little overbearing. This might be a little too hypersensitive. Here are some real-time scenarios and case studies that have involved data privacy in the scope of deepfakes and AI. So we've already, addressed and talked about defining what is a deepfake. How does AI and artificial intelligence make it easier and more accessible to manipulate any form of media? But these specific scenarios can look different, right? So there's a national security and law enforcement scenario here of inciting violence. If I am able to manipulate or produce media that looks like somebody did something or didn't do something, either way, right? Grandma walking across the street, guy runs up, knocks her over, right? Like everybody look at that and be like, that's terrible. Well, why would he do that? Hit and run cases with a motor vehicle accident. There are so many implications here. Obviously, on a grander scale with a lot of more politically charged topics, deep fakes can absolutely be utilized, not just domestically, but by international adversaries to incite violence and incite a message. This is where the disinformation component comes in online through social media. So it's very much a measure twice, believe once before you see any form of content online. But that's one example. The other example that they gave is producing false evidence about climate change or any specific criminal case, right? There could be evidence that's manipulated. There could be evidence that's tampered with or falsely generated in favor or non-favor of a legal proceeding. And so that's obviously a law enforcement scenario there. Deepfake kidnapping. This is obviously, I know we're hitting an incredibly upbeat topic this week, but there's interesting repercussions here, of hostage negotiation, right? Mostly in any form of hostage negotiation. I'm not a professional hostage negotiator. I've never worked for a SWAT team, but in most instances, there is a request for proof of life, or there is a request of proof of capture, or hey, do you really have the individual that you say you have? Are you making truthful claims? And deepfake kidnapping, now if we have some data about the individual, whether it's voice, whether it's image, whether it's video, there could be false proof of life claims there. And so again, we're going to keep rolling through these. I know some of these are really heavy, but the scenarios could not be more numerous on this matter. Another one is producing false evidence in a criminal case. We hit that already. So that's all the specific cases it outlines to national security and criminal justice system. There are commerce scenarios with corporate sabotage. There's another one with corporate enhanced social engineering attacks. We talked about this earlier, but you look at social engineering attacks against an existing service desk. Well, you know what? That's one thing to call up and say you're Bob Jones or whoever it is. It's another thing to hop on a video call to prove your identity. That is a real thing that we've seen done. Hey, I'm calling in I need to send this wire through. Hey, sir, I understand you want to do this, but we appreciate if we hop on a video call just to verify your identity, ask a couple of pieces of information. Great. They hop on a Zoom. They're using deepfakes of that individual. That's not them. And so very specific, targeted, corporate enhanced social engineering attacks here we've seen augmented and enhanced by deepfakes. and obviously here for real-time voice alteration for just over the phone scamming. Financial institutions, again, we talked about the title companies with the housing market and all the property being purchased in the past few years, routed to a representative and then utilizes some customer proprietary information obtained via the dark web. Again, if I can look like that person, sound like that person, and have the tokens of identification of that person, who on the other end of the line is going to think otherwise, right? Like, again, this increased suspicion is kind of what we're walking into. But corporate liability concerns is another one. Stock manipulation, this is huge, right? So if you see an instance of an experimental aircraft or experimental naval vessel, but there's a deep fake or there's a manipulated video of it exploding or sinking or crashing. Hey, guess what? Whatever manufacturer of that entity's stock could crash, and that video can be completely doctored. It could be completely fake. And so, and again, the repercussions of Nintendo's factory catches on fire or something. Like, again, whatever the repercussions could be, each one of these major $1 million, billion-dollar corporations have a lot of stock out there, and there's a lot of shareholders. And so any of the risk or any sensitivity around, hey, maybe this value is going to go down, oil rigs on fire for certain petroleum companies, things like that. This is where this becomes more relevant. And then there's societal scenarios. And this is where, again, regardless of who you are, regardless if you have been in cybersecurity for 12 plus years, whether you're just learning how to spell it, right? It doesn't matter. There are scenarios here applicable to everybody. Cyberbullying is one that we've seen in our own lives growing up. We've seen it in the physical, kinetic sense of bullying in schools, cyberbullying with the evolution of online social media, and knowing that there is proven evidence that youth in their developmental stages look towards tribal acceptance of their peers. That is a natural, instinctual, developmental stage they go through. They want validation from their peers. As you're growing up as a child, what your mom and dad say start to diminish, and what your peers say increases in significance, right? This is, again, I'm not a licensed family practitioner, but I have looked at family medicine and family counseling in my studies in my undergrad. So again, there's huge repercussions here for specific cyberbullying. Deep fakes as a cyberbullying example, which the introductory video hit already. Deep fake pornography. This is another one that's going to vary very specifically with up and coming state legislature that's already trying to tackle this, right? There's a lot of up and coming legislature that's been trying to ensure that the privacy and safety of children online is protected. We need more of that, please, and abundantly more of that. But there is also repercussions here of celebrity individuals, right, who have not partaken in any of that kind of content or explicit nature, but that content's being generated online. And these are everyday men and women, and they're also high-profile celebrities that are being subject to victimized by this type of attack. Societal scenario 3, it's 2024, election year. And so election interference, whether it's a political candidate saying something that could influence just like the stock market example earlier of how it can positively reflect on their campaign or it can negatively reflect on their campaign. Again, we've seen it regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, whether you've checked yourself out of the aisle entirely, right? There is absolutely, devious tactics that are used to send a message. And so this is something even more relevant for somebody trying to target or undermine or boost a certain campaign. Child predator threat scenario. We again are unpacking this for the sake of children and family safety. There are chat rooms that kids are getting into. There are specifically even video games online where there are voice modulations where you can sound younger than you are, older than you are, kind of altering your age, fake identity. Again, this is not a new thing. People getting a fake ID to get into somewhere that's age restricted, somewhere of that nature. So deep fakes are making that easier as well. But the summarize all of this is there are scenarios left and right where this will enter your orbit. If you're listening to this, if this is not something already you are keen to look out for, let this be the pounding of the table, ringing of the bell, waving of the flag, getting your attention on this matter, both for parents, single professional adults that don't have kids, right? Again, whoever you are, this topic is relevant. And again, within the scope of mitigation and prevention, there are ways to ensure, primarily starting with the data handling component, that we can mitigate some of this. And so, again, there's some practical examples. Didn't mean to go on, but feel free to stop, rewind, pause if any of those specific examples apply to you. We will make sure that that entire article is included in the details of the recording as well.
Yeah, it is really important and nice to see all those, well, not nice, but helpful to see all of those different scenarios, because if you are someone who thinks, oh, this isn't relevant to me or doesn't, make sense for me to even be listening to this, if you go and look at some of those scenarios, they might be relevant in your life, in your day to day. If you have one photo in public view, or if you are on one live stream like Mike and myself, or anything of that nature, you're putting yourself out there for risk. And I think it's just important to know that, because a lot of people don't. When you have that conversation with family members or whoever it is on why you're not sharing, or why there's a heart over my child's face, and so on and so forth, you get a lot of questions. And I feel like it is very sad that there is a large number of people who are just completely oblivious of any kind of risk at all. They're like, "Oh, it's just social media." But,
Who would do such a thing?
it's yeah,
Right. Like, yeah.
but, there are bad apples everywhere, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just to kind of switch the topic a little bit, AI isn't all bad. This isn't meant to scare you or anything. There are some wonderful AI utilities, and we want to partake in them and use them responsibly. So, what ethical considerations should be taken into account when developing or deploying AI technologies that can impact privacy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think your Roombas are safe. If you're worried about, hey, they're taking over the world, I think your Roomba is a safe medium. If you want the robot to vacuum your house, I think, again, as long as it doesn't have a camera on it and it's scanning, infrared is one thing, right? Being able to scan what's a chair, what's a couch, what's a wall. But in all seriousness, there are a lot of technical practitioners I know. I think our call volume in a good way has increased exponentially on people wanting to get in contact with us through the evolution of this podcast talk show thing that we've thrown together. But almost, I would say 1 in 4 calls have an AI note taker that they join as an automatic guest. So fun fact, if you're ever on an intro or pre-sales call with BLOKWORX, we don't let your robots in. It's humans only. So if you're already like, that's a disqualification for me, we love you. We wish you the best in your hunt for managed cybersecurity, but we are very sensitive to transcribing and capturing of voice data for this specific reason. We have to be consistent, practicing what we preach. And another piece of that consistency is, what kind of devices do you have in your home? These Amazon Echo Dots, these Apple HomePods. I know these devices have come up a number in the past few weeks on stream. We're not knocking these devices. We don't have a vendetta against Amazon and Apple and Google Home and all of this, but it is merely a recognition that we have to be cognizant, aware of what we're doing with our data. It's not even our data. It's our voice. It's not even something we think of as data. It's like, I just have one voice. This is my voice. But the repercussions we've seen have gotten heavier and heavier as threat actors get more crafty. And so personal applications, guarding your data as much as you can, whether that's email, your activities of what you're doing. There's always a fun thing on Instagram that I always appreciate. I think it's called Latergram, if that's still around, right? Where you delay the post of the thing that's happening, so you're not live broadcasting where you are. Hey, just left my house. I'm at the movie theater for the next 3 hours. If anybody wants to break in, I'm down the street, right? So, kind of delaying the frequency of when you post that, maybe resisting the urge of, I know your pasta, the Italian place looks great. You really want to post it, make all your friends jealous, but maybe post it after you get home. There's some things here that, again, they're open source intelligence for threat actors, whether it's your personal social media, whether it's a corporate account, even within, yourself as a content developer for so much that we do as a company. Hey, this is where the team is this week. This is where we're traveling. These are things we have to be cognizant of for specific security of, hey, being sure that if I'm tagged, if I'm traveling, that means I'm not home. So again, it's thinking about these things and making sure your family is educated more specifically, because if you're in this room listening to this, if you're in Spotify, if you're in any one of the mediums catching it live, most likely, because we're in your orbit, you're somewhat aware of this. There is an obligation to carry this news back home. and make sure that there is intentional family discussion, sitting down with your significant other, with your kids, with your family, right? You get to be that person, that guy or gal at Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever. Hey, let's talk about this because it's relevant. It's
Yeah.
incredibly relevant. But again, smart home devices and what data they're collecting within the scope of data privacy is incredibly relevant. Social media and what data is being collected, and more importantly, what's being done with that data, incredibly relevant. Even smart home devices or even smart watches for kids is a really prevalent trend where they may not be old enough to maybe warrant a phone, but we're going to get them this watch. Well, the watch tracks them 24/7. Parents are like, that's a plus. Threat actors are like, that's a plus, right? And so again, you got to think about who has access to this data, how is it being monitored, things of that nature.
Yeah, and something that I brought up in a recent blog that we posted to the BLOKWORX blog page is posting reoccurring events. If you go to church every single Sunday at 10 a.m., you're letting anyone, it could be friends and family, it could be, you know, Joe Bob, who you've never met, that lives down the street from you. Depending on what your privacy settings are, you're letting someone know that you're not home every single Sunday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. So if you do have like reoccurring events, maybe change the times a little bit. Kind of like the laying that Mike said. If you go every Sunday at 10 a.m., maybe change that and say that you do, the noon service or something of that nature. If you want to brag about it, that's perfectly fine. Just be careful about if you're posting what church you go to, where it's located,
Exactly.
if you're leaving your house, it is important to, keep in mind, especially if you're posting about being at a certain location. It does put you at a risk. So,
No, Elizabeth, it's an incredibly relevant scenario because, again, we see these things as users as features and benefits. Oh, I can
yeah.
geographically tag that I'm here. I can tag the location. I could tag this BurgerFi. I'm having this bomb milkshake right now, whatever it is, right? But again, that's just additional data that we're stacking in the evidence column that is open source. It is open to everybody. I encourage you to do this. If everybody's like, man, BLOKWORX is anti-social media, maybe not anti-social
We're not.
media, but we're absolutely anti you sharing every one of your moves and location, right, on an open source medium. iMessage end-to-end encrypted, Signal end-to-end encrypted, Session end-to-end encrypted. Message those friends you want to share this news with directly. You could still share this news. You could still share your bomb meal at Olive Garden or Maggiano's or wherever you're going, right? Like, again, I'm partial to Italian food because who doesn't love Italian food? But,
Spaghetti's the
there's
best.
ways to still live, right? And, if you're thinking about the Ted Lasso, it's like, let them live, right? That's still us. We want you to live. But I think there's a moment where we just have to recognize the weight. And because feature and benefit so heavily drive the industry right now. And it's been the case forever, but there are articles written 40, 50 years ago that the internet would never take off, that the personal computer would never be needed in every American home. That was not a long time ago, ladies and gentlemen. And so as we embark on this, kind of conversation, and we say journey intentionally, because for everybody, we talked about it, there's going to be different personal conviction here, and that's okay. We're not saying there is a static way to do data privacy within your own personal sense. There's obviously frameworks like NIST and things of that are data governance frameworks that you obviously have to follow, PCI, DSS, HIPAA, etc. But within your personal journey, for whoever you are as a listener, wherever you are in your professional or personal life, there is absolutely relevance here that we just want you to take to heart. And so that's kind of the topic of today, the heartfelt message, as we have been passionately talking about this for the past 40 minutes or so, is there is absolutely professional application here, there's societal application here, there's criminal justice and federal political application here, and even more so with those with young children, either nieces and nephews, right? Your sister, brother, in-laws have kids that you're an aunt or uncle to, and if you have your own kids, if you're blessed in that way, great. But it is definitely something we wanted to raise attention to and just sound the alarm on, because we think that there is a lot of families and individuals that are on the reactive side of the fence on this matter, and we're going to see the repercussions of that 20 years from now. So again, take this words to heart. Hopefully there's some practical application in it, and a little bit more to unpack, but that's where the heartfelt message of this is all coming from.
Yeah, and like Mike said, we're not totally against social media. We understand that, you've been posting or you don't want to stop. We're not telling you what you can and cannot do. This is just purely to spread awareness, like you said, and just kind of, raise a little bit of a flag or red flag for you so people are more aware, which is why we really wanted to share that video, even though it was a little bit harsh to watch. So. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. A big thank you to Mike for joining today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We know this conversation may have touched on some unsettling topics, but spreading awareness is crucial, and it's our goal at the end of the day, even when it's not the happiest of subjects. So, for more information, you can also check out the most recent blog post on BLOKWORX.com. And then in the description of this live stream or audio clip is going to be links to the video and the two articles that we kind of broke down a little bit today. So be sure to look out for that. And hopefully, we will see you next time on the safety brief. Until then, stay safe and stay frosty.
Thanks all.